Stephen Concannon, and welcome to Fencing Ireland Sits Down With, a new limited series where I have the pleasure of sitting down with some of the biggest names in Irish fencing to chat about their international fencing experience. Today I'm talking to Siobhan Byrne, who attended the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games. Make sure to stay with us to the end where I'll ask Siobhan about her favourite way to score a point. Siobhan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I know, it's great. It's great to be able to talk to you. I suppose getting started, tell us, how did you get involved in fencing?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I actually grew up in Germany. I moved to Newtown when I was 7 years old, and my parents were trying to get me involved in a sport, and tried everything, you know, track and field and ballet and you name it, soccer. And my neighbor, she went to fencing, and she suggested I come to practice with her. I had no clue what fencing even was. No one in my family had ever done it. But I went and I really loved it, and it fit my personality. You know, it was an individual sport. You can perfect the skill. It wasn't too physically taxing at first. You know, when you're young, 7 years old, you're more playing, and I just really enjoyed that there was a cerebral aspect to it as well. So it was a strategy. So it wasn't just running in a circle, but it was actually like I had to understand what I was doing. And so yeah, that's how I started.
Okay, great. And so obviously we have you here today, and as I already mentioned, you took part in the 2008 Beijing Olympics. When did that become a goal for you?
Yeah, I actually have a distinct memory of when I realized that it was a possibility. It was the 2000 Olympics in Sydney. They were being televised, and that was the first time when I actually knew someone who was competing in the Olympics. I knew someone personally because I started competing internationally when I was 14. So obviously I got to know a lot more of the international fencers and everyone who was competing at that level. So having that connection point of being like, oh, so these people that I've met and that I've competed against, there's people that are actually at the Olympics. So yeah, that was the first time I was like, okay, if they can do it, so can I. Like, it's not that far-fetched. It seemed a lot more tangible and accessible at that point. So
No,
yeah.
it's pretty cool. Okay. And how did you find, once you kind of made up your mind, how did you find, well, obviously I know you've been training for years, but how did you find the qualification process?
It's obviously quite difficult. Qualifying for the Olympics, you know, it's a 4-year process. And in reality, for me, it was an 8-year process. Because after the Sydney Olympics, when I realized that it was a goal, so I started sort of training towards 2004, and you know, it requires a lot of patience and a lot of stamina in terms of like staying positive throughout, because in a 4-year time span, you're not always going to have like progress or grow at the same way that you would like to, or have the same type of results. And there's times where you may have a season that's just not great, and to not lose that like hope that you can actually, or faith that you can actually make it. So I think it's pretty grueling in that sense. It takes a specific type of person to be so committed and disciplined, and because you do put a lot of your hold to compete at that level. And yeah, but it's ultimately worth it. The qualifying process itself, you know, for me was a little bit more difficult than for others because I didn't have that team component. Yeah. Whereas a lot of people can qualify through that avenue. I didn't have that. I also wasn't top 8 in the world ever, so at seniors, so that fell away. So the only real option was the qualifying tournament, the zonals, which puts a lot of pressure on you. You have one shot, right? So it's not like you can qualify. If you qualify as a team, you know, you have a whole season to really like work towards qualifying. And if you have that one shot at zonals, that's pretty
it's intense.
Yeah, it's very intense.
Yeah. And so what changed once you had qualified?
Yeah, to be honest, it was a bit of a whirlwind. I qualified in April of 2008, and I was still in school, so I was still in college. And I was finishing that year, so I still had a couple of months left until June to finish and graduate. So I finished school in June and graduated. And then I just like kept training with my coach at Ohio State. So I just, instead of going home or traveling for the summer, what like I would usually, I stayed up Olympics. And then we went to China about 2 weeks prior to the Olympics, and we went to the FIE training camp that they held. So that was sort of what we decided to do. One thing that I just forgot. I actually also went to, before we went to China, we went to Atlanta and we trained with Seda Jacobson and her coach and others from the US team. So just to compete with a few other athletes that were preparing for the Olympics. So yeah, lots of training camps, lots of travel leading up to it. I also had to come to Ireland a few times for press and things like that. So it was really a lot going on and a bit of a whirlwind, to be honest, between April and August.
Yeah.
So a lot.
And just now that you mention it, how did you find the FIE training camps?
Yeah, that was my first time attending one, and it actually was really good. It was great. It was 2 hours outside of China in Tianjin, and yeah, it was great. It was like a week of, it was good competing with other people. My coach was there with me, which was important for me, obviously. So I was able to take lessons with him every day and stay on course. So I wasn't necessarily training with any other coaches. So it was good sparring practice to be with the others.
Okay, and was there any kind of looking over your shoulder as to what other people were doing, or were you able to keep it focused on yourself?
There weren't a ton of women's saber fencers there, which was good for me. It was more, I was competing with some of the men or training with some of the men, so I didn't really have that pressure, which was great. So I relaxed.
And when you look back, is there anything that stands out about your performance on the day?
Yeah, obviously it was very disappointing for me, the performance itself. But when you say stand out, I think to me, looking back, I wish I could have been more in the moment. You know, I think with nerves just got away. Like I was just like a ball of nerves at the end, and really worried more about what all the what ifs, what could go wrong, and like what if I lost, and what if this, and because you worked your whole life towards this one moment, and in the end I wish I could have just been more in the moment and enjoy it and like be like just there versus so in my head and worried about everything, because in the end I think that led to me not performing as well as I could have. But no regrets. It's, you know, it was a great experience. It's hard enough to get there.
Well, that's exactly. There's very few people who get to even tell those kind of stories and experience what you've been through. It does sound incredibly hard, but don't let that take away from you getting there at all. And so, then thinking about your fencing career as a whole, are there any other kind of moments that stand out to you over the years?
Yeah, there are many moments. You know, it changed the trajectory of my life, really. Training in Germany and growing up there, but competing for Ireland. So I was always sort of representing multiple countries or traveling and training in different places. And then I got recruited to go compete or train in the US at a university. So leaving my whole family, friends, and everything behind in the pursuit of that goal of making it to the Olympics. So there's lots of moments in my life that sort of were defined by fencing. And there's obviously lots of great wins too, and you know, like lots of moments where you just enjoyed traveling and like funny stories, and sometimes like great losses that really taught me a lot as well, you know, where I had to like really grow as a person and as an athlete. So I mean, I can't even like I competed for 17 years or trained for or fenced for 17 years, really compete at an international level for 11 of those teams. So moments, I don't even know where to there's one particular one that stands out.
You mentioned that you were recruited for Ohio State, was that right? How did that come about?
Oh, that's a long story. Well, there was some conflict of interest as I was training for the 2004 Olympics. I became one of the top fencers and junior fencers in the world, but also in Germany, I was one of the top junior fencers. My club coach at the time then was appointed to be the German national coach. So it became a little bit difficult because he was the German national coach, yet his best student represented Ireland. So it didn't really go over quite well for the German Federation and others. So there was a lot of pressure put on me to compete for Germany, which I did think about. It just at some point decided against. And so then my options were kind of limited in Germany.
Okay.
And that was like right leading up. That was actually the season, the qualifying season for 2004, which I was kind of left without a coach, and I ended up trying to qualify on my own, which I almost made, but
very close. Yeah,
I was very close. Yeah, I was like lost by 2 points. And then during that whole year, the fencing community, international fencing community, is quite small. So everybody, of course, knew that I trained in Germany, and that's because I competed there trained there my whole life and traveled with the team. So it was obvious that something had changed, right? So a lot of the other coaches around the world actually approached me and asked me what was going on, and I had offers even to train with the French national team. And I looked into that as well. I remember going to Paris to figure out, can I go to university there, because I was studying French in high school. And then I also got a scholarship, like Vladimir Nazimov, who was the coach at Ohio State at the time, also approached me and asked if I wanted to come train at Ohio State. So yeah, so everybody kind of knew I was without a home.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, it doesn't sound easy, but at the same time, it's nice to know that there were plenty of options there at the same time.
Yeah, it was very nice.
Are there any particular, what would you say might be the proudest moment or the proudest results that when you look back over the years?
Yeah, I mean, obviously qualifying for the Olympics, that moment was, I remember just such huge relief, because I had gone through qualifiers once before, and I know what that felt like to not make it. And then going again with that, like, sort of like lost it in mind and that pressure, and knowing I kind of put my life on hold, and I also made, left my family behind and all those things to get to another point where I could have a shot at it, and then to make it, that was very much like, okay, it was all worth it. So that was a big one. And then also there's so many moments with, because again, I didn't have that team experience on the international level. I really enjoyed that part at like the collegiate level here in the US, because like I had that whole fencing team, and we won like NCAA championships here together. So that was a huge for me as well, because it was sort of a shared experience, which was nice. I didn't have many of those throughout my career. So yeah, I would say those are two big ones that stand out for me.
No, and I must say, actually, even just personally, I remember when you did the Five Nations. I think, I'm not sure, was it 2007 or 2008, but I remember when you were here in Dublin for it. And I have to say, kind of like you said, when you can see these things are happening around, it was quite amazing to see, oh my God, everyone was very much aware, there's Siobhan Byrne, and really putting it up to the other nations in a way that maybe we weren't so accustomed to seeing at the time. So no, that was pretty special for some of us anyway.
Yeah, great.
So again, thinking about the Olympics, I'm not sure exactly how it all works. Did you get to experience much of the Olympics outside of fencing at all when you were there?
Oh yeah. So good thing and bad thing. So my event was the first event, like the first day of the Olympics, so right out. So I didn't get to go to the opening ceremonies, which was a little bit of a disappointment. But at the same time, I was done the first day. So so that was, I guess, like the good news. So I got to stay for the 2 weeks, the entire 2 weeks, which I know not everybody is allowed to do, which was because I was able to go to some other events. I also had obviously some friends there within the fencing circuit that also had qualified, so we were spending time together. My parents were also there, so I spent some time with them. Also we went to see the Great Wall of China and sort of the Silk Market in Beijing, and just spending time with them after the Olympics was great as well. But yeah, just a lot of fun, you know, a lot of the parties that were just for the Olympians, and it's just you enter a whole different, it's like a different universe, you know, for the couple of weeks that you're there. It's you're sort of immersed in this different world.
No, that sounds pretty good. You can see your face light up remembering that, so that's nice.
Lots of memories.
Yeah. So thinking about fencing a little bit more, the actual doing of the sport, we'll say. Were there any particular styles of fencers that you either enjoyed or disliked fencing against?
Yeah, I really enjoyed fencing people that had really clean and great technique. It just, you know, made it for a very, like, a nicer experience or a nicer bout. And the opposite is true. I really disliked people that did not have great technique and were like messy fencers, because sometimes those are even harder to compete against, because they're very unpredictable. Like, their movements are very unpredictable and not as, so I would say those are, and then also like fencing against someone who's left-handed was also a challenge. But
interesting. And just actually, when you say that, did you have any was there anyone on your team that was left-handed? Because I found even sometimes having just one left-handed person in a fencing hall can sometimes make a big difference to that.
Yeah, on the Ohio State fencing team, there was a few that were left-handed. It definitely helped over time, I think, to your point. Like, the more you train with someone who is left-handed, it's easier, but it's never as intuitive as, I think, competing with someone who is right-handed.
Yeah, no, I understand completely. And was there any particular fencers that stood out, maybe opponents or teammates that stood out over the years?
Yeah, obviously, I would say like Marielle Zagunis. She's a great friend of mine, and we actually met when we were 15 at Cadet World Championships in 2015, a long time ago. And yeah, I admire her because she's a fierce competitor, and she's managed to stay at the top for a very, very, very long time, which is very hard to do, right? To be able to stay competitive at that high level and be successful, and also to continue to have that drive and the passion for the sport. So I think I admire her for that, because I know myself, I did it for a long time, and it's hard to stay, keep that sort of momentum going, and again, keep that drive and that passion alive. So I admire her for that. And then beyond just her being a great fencer and a great competitor, she's also just a great person and a great friend, like, outside of that. So I really admire her for that. And
no, that sounds really nice. And so I can't let you go without asking you, what is your favorite way of scoring a point?
Yeah, I think the most satisfying touches to me were always when you have a really clean and strong parry riposte, like in the box, maybe, or also like a really long, strong attack. Like when they really, when that works out, I think it's just the most satisfying, because it's just such a strong way to score a point. You know, I feel like a very dominating way of scoring a point, like very clear, versus it being like a, you know, some preparation or something. That's those are great, and I like those too, but they're not as like solid, like one-lighters. Yeah.
No, I understand that they're very emphatic. Yeah, it's very, very, very sabre. So it is. Yeah. But listen, I have to say, Siobhan, it's been absolutely great chatting to you and hearing about your career as a fencer. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. Thanks to all of our viewers at home. If you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure you like and subscribe to Fencing Ireland. Don't forget, you can also find Fencing Ireland on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or at fencingireland.net. Goodbye.
Bye.